Most of the big mistakes we make in life are not because we listened to our gut, but because we ignored it. When a voice inside, a quiet voice says, don't do this, but the mind steps in and it overrules, we make the smart choice, and that often turns out to be a disaster. Welcome to the Inner Entrepreneur Podcast. This is the Inner Mentor series. Last week, I recorded an episode that spoke about a decision I made by trusting my gut, a decision that ultimately saved me €5 million. The episode actually got a lot of reaction, and a question came up a couple of times. In fact, I was sitting with an entrepreneur during the week, and he asked me, he said, Paul, this listening to your heart and your gut, not just your head, I get it, but how do I know the difference? How do I know which voice to trust? I think that's a really, really good question. But the answer comes down to practice. And I think the reason someone asked that question is because they're simply out of practice of listening to what their heart tells them and what their gut tells them. And listening to your instinct, it's a skill. Just like any other skill that you develop, it takes practice. Now, I would not suggest that you go out tomorrow and start making huge business and life decisions just on your gut. Maybe start small and start practicing, because the more you listen to that quiet voice inside, the clearer it becomes, the more of an ally it becomes to you, and the more familiar and trusting you become of it. Let me tell you a story that an entrepreneur shared with me during the week. It's a very personal story, and she told me about her first marriage. At the time, she was 26 years of age. And on the morning before she was to get married, she went out for a walk with her best friend, her bridesmaid. And during that walk, she revealed something quite extraordinary. She turned to her best friend and she said, I am making a bad decision. I should not be marrying this man. Now, imagine that moment. It's 3 hours before your wedding. Your heart, your instinct is telling you very clearly, don't do this, don't marry this man. But your head is saying something completely different. Her head was saying that, look, you're getting married in 3 hours. It's too late to change everything. Think of the chaos you would cause. Think of the humiliation, the embarrassment. Think of the people you'll upset, your fiance, your family, his family, all the guests who have given you presents, who have traveled to the wedding, people that traveled from overseas. And her mind was telling her that, I just can't deal with this. You need to get married. And so, against her instinct, she got married that day. But of course, in time, she realized there was a cost to ignoring her instinct. You see, years later, she reflected on that moment and that conversation with her best friend. And she said something. She said that if she'd cancelled the wedding then, it would have been incredibly difficult. I mean, the whole day would have been chaos, telling her fiance, telling both the families, facing the embarrassment, telling the shocked guests, the chaos that would have ensued. But she thought about it and she reckoned, it would have been a horrible couple of days, horrible. A week or two would have been awful, but it would begun to fade. Maybe it would have been a really unpleasant, uncomfortable couple of months. But eventually life would have settled. Everyone would have adjusted to the idea and they moved on. But instead, she got married. And she spent the next 25 years married to a man that she knew from the very beginning she should not have married. And of course, that's never going to end well. And that caused enormous stress for her, enormous stress for her fiance, enormous stress for her fiance, her then husband, enormous stress for both families. And they had children. So now there were children involved. And the impact of that rippled out through the years and impacts so many people's life even today. At one point she told me she even questioned whether or not she wanted to continue living. So instead of dealing with a short-term difficulty, instead of dealing with something that was really hard to face that moment, her mind concocted a story to help her avoid the pain she was going to experience that day. But in doing that, created a problem that has lasted over 25 years. Her heart, her gut, her intuition, you call it whatever you want, was calling to her, screaming her to make a very hard decision, a very hard choice, but one that in the long run would have proven to be the easy choice and the best choice for everybody. Not at the time, it would have caused an awful reaction at the time, but as time moved on, it would have been best for everybody. Her mind led her to a decision that solved a short-term problem and created 25 years of misery. So the challenge is, how do you balance these two voices between the head, the heart? The first thing to recognize something very important is both voices are speaking to you. Your mind will speak, your instinct will speak, and you should listen to both. The problem is not that people use their head. You have a mind, use it. The problem is that most people allow their minds to make every decision and they ignore their heart, their instinct, their gut. Whatever the heart is calling to them, they just ignore that and they allow the mind to make the decision. So what this lady could have done that morning was she could have paused and she could have recognized something very simple, a very simple fact. She could have recognized that my head is telling me one thing and my heart is telling me another. And experience has taught most of us that when your heart is telling you do not do something, you simply shouldn't do it. So when people ask me, how do I learn to trust my gut and listen to my heart? My answer is always the same. Practice it. Why don't you start small? Every day, listen to your instinct as it's calling to you, as it's talking to you, and follow it. And notice when it serves you. And notice there's times when, if you think it doesn't serve you that well, because like any skill, the more you practice it, the better it gets, the more natural it becomes, and the more intuitive, the more in tune you become to it. Now, let me say something that might be counterintuitive at this point and might seem to contradict a lot of what I've said already. I run two businesses and I invest a lot of money, and I do not make business decisions or investment decisions with my heart or my instinct. I make them with my head. Now, that may sound strange based on everything I've said, but hold a sec, let me explain. I run my businesses with my heart and my head. So the culture of our business, how we treat the people, how we treat our customers, how we treat our suppliers, our partners, the essence of the personality of my business comes from my heart. It's a reflection of who I am inside. Hey, by the way, for a long time, how I ran it was not a reflection of who I am inside, and it led me to misery. So the business I run today is an absolute reflection of my instinct, of my heart calling me how I need to be, how to live and show up in the world. But when it comes to doing a deal, when it comes to the numbers, when it comes to making financial decisions, that's where I bring the head in. However, there is one rule I never break. This is it. If something looks good on paper, it looks like it will make lots of money, but my instinct is screaming, no, I will never do it. Never. Full stop. Ever. Now let's flip the coin the other way. What happens when your heart says, yeah, Paul, do this. This feels great. But your head says no. In that situation, I have a very simple process that has evolved for me over the years. First, I examine the situation carefully. So I know my heart is calling me to do something, but I examine the situation carefully. And if my head is saying something just doesn't look right, so something doesn't fit logically with the numbers or whatever, I listen to that. I don't ignore it. I listen to it. I write down my concerns. I literally list them. I examine them. I get advice from people I trust. And I ask myself a very simple question. What might go wrong here? And more importantly, what are the consequences? What are the costs of it going wrong? What are the downsides? So let's say I'm looking at investing in something I'm very passionate about. And if I calculated that it goes wrong, if the investment doesn't work, it might cost the business, say, 100,000 euro. And so I ask myself a very simple question. Can I live with that? Can I live with the loss of 100,000 euro? If the answer is yeah, then I might take the risk. But for someone else, the number might be 10,000 euro, might be €1,000,000, might be €100. The number doesn't matter, but the process is the same. The question is always the same. Can you live with the downside? If I can't live with the downside, then the answer is a no. Now, I invest also in the stock market. And when it comes to investing in the stock market, I take a very different approach. I make zero emotional decisions. None. I follow a very strict system. I follow a trading system called Dow theory, which is about 100 years old. So it's 100 years of records that I can draw on and refer to. It tells me when to enter the market and it tells me when to exit. And I follow it religiously. Because emotions can run wild when you're investing. Stock markets go up and down. You do not need your emotion, anyone's emotions, even if you're an experienced investor. They can run wild, and that's not good. Not a good place to make decisions. But even in here, my heart plays a pivotal role. Not in the investment decision itself, not in when I exit and when I enter. They're numbers based. That's looking at the graphs. It's not, oh, I feel this. I don't use that for making buy-sell decisions. But I do that for choosing the type of life I want to live. You see, I realized a long time ago, I want a quiet, peaceful life. I don't want to be involved in lots of businesses. I know other entrepreneurs and they invest here and they invest there, invest in lots of places. And I decided that doesn't work for me. It doesn't suit me. I don't want the complexity in my life all that brings. So I invest in my core businesses, and then everything else I invest in the stock market because I don't have employees. I don't have to deal with operations. I don't want the phone calls. I just want the simplicity. I want time in my life to think, to reflect, to do the work that I really love to do. So my heart led me towards this way of investing. It's long-term and it's hands-off. My heart sent me in that direction. Once that decision was made, I knew I was following the path my heart had laid out, but now my head comes in to choose the best system. So after doing this for a very long time, I've come to see something quite clearly. There's actually a very simple way to think about the relationship between the heart, the head, gut instinct. First, let your heart set the direction you take your life in. It knows your values, your instincts, what feels right. So let it set the path, the road you walk on in life. Now, step 2, you know the road you're walking down. Now let your mind do the analysis, run the numbers, examine the risks, think logically. Your mind is excellent at execution. It's just bad at deciding the road to walk down, but it's really good at executing it. And step 3, always, 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 always pay attention to your gut instinct. If something looks good on paper, but your instinct says no, you should pay very serious attention to that voice. The way I see it is very simple. Your heart sets the destination, and then you let your mind help you get there safely. If you listened to last week's episode, you'll know I came very close to making a decision that could have cost me €5 million and led to my financial ruin. And listening to my gut prevented me from that stupid decision. And when you come very close to a cliff edge like that, you learn a lesson and you start paying attention. So you start practicing. You start listening to your instinct. You let it tell you where you want to go in life, but you let your mind get you there safely. Thanks for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this episode and have taken a lot from it. And I encourage you to think of just one person who might really benefit from hearing what we discussed here and send it on to them. Maybe you could be the person that would inspire someone else. And if something from this conversation has resonated with you and you'd like to explore it further, you can apply for a discovery call using the link below. Thanks for listening. Until next time, take care.